Hello, everyone. It's great to have you with us for our second in the four-part series on mental health and missionaries and ministers. And so we want to welcome you. My name is Mark Hosfeld. I'm the director for the Institute for Ministerial Wholeness. And with me today are good friends, colleagues that have spoken powerfully into my life and to so many others. We have Dr. Grant Jones, psychologist, and then we also have psychologist Nathan Davis and counselor Dr. Beth Davis. And so we want to welcome them. Thank you all for being on with us again. The fruit of the work that you've done on these webinars in the past has been such a blessing to so many people that it's always an honor to have you on. And today we're going to be talking about ministry and missions and the dynamic of mental health and how do we keep ourselves in a place where we are functioning fully the way God wants us to, and within our minds and our emotions. I know that when I was pastoring in the city of Chicago, the church that we planted a number of years ago, I had reached a place where we saw wonderful blessing in the work that we were doing. The church was growing. We had planted a couple churches, and we had a building program going on. My prayer life was where it should be. My marriage was in a great place. Our three little kids at that time, who are now married and having their own kids, were very healthy. And so all around the outward appearances, everything was great. But then within myself, I felt like I had a bucket within me with a ladle in it. And every time somebody picked up that ladle to pull something out for them, there was nothing there. And on top of it, there was nothing there for me. And I remember I reached a place one time in my home study where I just felt so depleted, and I was praying. I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing in my formation practices as a Christian, not just as a pastor, but as a Jesus follower. And I remember saying these words: I minister to everyone else. Who's going to minister to me? And so that began me on a journey. And much of what we're going to hear today will be helpful if you find yourself in that place, or even if you know someone in that place, you can recommend this webinar to them, because on our website, iamwholeness.org, we embed all the webinars that we do. So just by giving their email address, they can also watch the webinar that we're doing today and all the previous ones as well. And so with that, we want to welcome you. And so I'm going to be talking and asking some questions of our guests today. And we're going to begin with Dr. Grant Jones. And Grant, a big part of mental health is finding that place of compassion that will lead us to feel the freedom to address mental health issues. I think sometimes this is an area that many people in ministry, whether they're pastors or missionaries, they have a fear of even bringing up mental health issues because they're wondering what kind of reception are they going to get? Are they going to be received? Are they going to be marked by bringing up mental health issues? I know that the Davises were a tremendous help to my wife and me when we were area directors for Central Eurasia, just not long after 9/11. The stress was so great going in and out of that part of the world, and our missionaries were challenged at numerous fronts, that we sought their counsel, and they helped us tremendously with mental health issues. We even were prescribed a medication for a period of time that got us over the hump to be able to function within our own lives effectively, let alone leading others. And I think that the compassion they gave was tremendous. And so I want to start with you today. And what is compassion in the realm of mental health? And lead us from there.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mark, and welcome everybody. Grant Jones here. I most let me. Is it okay if I pull up my slide here, Mark?
Absolutely.
Okay, a couple of slides here that I want to kind of be a core. I'm not going to read them, but I just want them to give me some direction. I assume everyone can see these. Healthy self-care does enhance kingdom work. All of what drives people into working for the kingdom is a big part is compassion. There's no doubt about that. And so we can use that, give that compassion to other people. It drives, motivates us. But then do we give compassion to ourselves? And without it, and so this is where, let me just put on a couple of things here that I want to, Come on, there we go. These are some of the points I want to make. Give us some direction, and please interrupt at any time with questions. But I wish I had known this 20 years ago. I wish my parents had known this 40 years ago. It is a biblical mandate to take care of ourselves. It's not in question, it's not in doubt. But it also, when you take greater care of yourself, you actually enhance your kingdom work. That's my fundamental premise, that thesis. It's both biblical, it's both mental health, psychological. There's tons of research supporting that. The difference between empathy and compassion, what's that look like? What does it mean to love our neighbors as ourselves? How do we do that? I want to give a good working definition of love, and then some strategies on how to do self-care, biblical self-care. And then Nathan and Mark also have a ton of material and help in that regard as well. And if you need these slides, just email me, grantjonesphd@gmail.com. It's also in the chat, and I will send these to you. I use these at the GO conference for U.S. Missions as well. What is compassion? Look at that first line. Compassion towards others is a caring response to, pick this, to suffering that acknowledge the shared human condition of imperfection and involves turning toward rather than denying or avoiding the pain. All of us in the mental health, ministerial, missionary, we have compassion for the suffering, the hurting. And we deal with their spiritual soul, but also their physical and mental health as well. It's a desire to ease distress. That's what compassion is. That's the emotional part. And then the cognitive part is we tend to offer a non-judgmental understanding to those who fail or do wrong. So that's compassion, is this caring response to help those that are hurting, suffering in a non-judgmental way. And we want to make their lives less painful. Empathy is really interesting in the sense of it's a mental component. It's the capacity to be affected by and share the state of others in such a way you feel into it. You walk their shoes, you step into their pathway. And so but compassion is taking empathy in action. So you experience the person's personal distress and condition, and then you do something about it. You try to do something about it. So empathy in action is another term for compassion. And I like that. Just from a mental health state of mind, though, if you have relational wounds yourself, it may impede what the next step is that I need us to go to, and that is self-compassion. And it also may impede the ability to be compassionate to other people. So the compassion drives all of us in the mental health world, in the ministerial world, missionary world. We care about other people's well-being, and we feel called to do that, and we have no problem going into all the world to do that. Not a problem. So what is self-compassion? Well, it is that compassion turned inward, a kind, caring response to our own suffering, coupled with a desire to ease that distress. It also offers non-judgmental understanding of ourselves in the context that we are in an imperfect world, and we make mistakes and we share human fallibility. Self-compassion involves being caring and supportive to ourselves when we suffer. We have no problem doing it to others, but do we do it to ourselves? Even when our suffering stems from our own personal failures or perceived inadequacies, we are still to be self-compassionate. And self-compassion is not being selfish, but it's love in action. Love in action is self-compassion. So this is interesting to me when we look at what are some biblical passages that address loving self. I'm not sure if I ever remember a single sermon in my 68 years of life where someone says, we're going to preach on loving yourself today. Has anyone ever heard a sermon on that? I hear a lot, you need to suffer more, you need to sacrifice more, you need to give more, you need to do more. But not once, not one time have I ever heard a sermon, how do we start loving ourselves in a way that is biblical? What's the second greatest commandment? Love your neighbor as yourself. There's no greater than these. No one ever hated their own body, but they fed and cared for their own body, just as Christ does the church. This is an interesting. To acquire wisdom is to love yourself. I may remember reading that in Proverbs. To acquire wisdom is to love yourself. Romans 13:9. All of those can be summed up. Love your neighbor as yourself. So you can see that this notion of loving self is the second greatest command, because the more you love yourself, the more you can love your neighbor. There's a direct correlation, positive correlation between the two. More love self. I even share that the more you love yourself, the less likely you're going to be selfish. And the more likely it is to take a back seat. And it's easier to be more humble if you love yourself, because you won't have to be defending yourself or justifying yourself. And so that to me is transformational. So here's my working definition of love. And I know everyone says, what is love? Oh, 1 Corinthians 13. Well, I don't really like that chapter as a definition of love. It's more of a treatise. It's more of a philosophy. There's truth, biblical truth in there. But as a psychologist, I need something a little bit more operational. So here's what I've come up with. Came back from my supervisor 30 years ago as a psychologist who was a believer, and it's morphed. Love is doing what is best for the person, or creating an opportunity for the person to become a better person. But don't stop there. Without either one's integrity or personhood being harmed or compromised. If I do something that compromises my integrity, it's not love, or the person I'm working with. Loving behavior improves the lives of both giver and recipient. If either one is harmed, then it's really not love. I'd be curious in reactions to that. Because again, not too many, this is something I haven't heard people talk about that much. And so be curious as to how that impacts you. But this is when we love our neighbor, love our spouse, love our employees, love the world, what do we try to do? Make it better for him or her, for them. All right? Am I supposed to love myself? And the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. So when you let people violate your boundaries, that is not love. When you set boundaries and don't enforce them and keep them, that is also not love. If what you do humiliates a person, then it's not love, even if it makes you feel better. So here's their science, the research, and tons of research. Forgive me for getting excited about this, but anyway, why love? Go ahead.
Grant, I just want to project a question on, or not really, or an observation. I'd like you to go back to the last slide for just 1 minute. Because I think this is such a pearl of a statement, as we have been coming out of a discussion not so long ago on spiritual abuse. And can you connect this to that concept as well? I mean, I just feel like this is really such a good definition of how we should perform as givers of the good news. And I see a great correlation between this definition for loving as a prevention for abusing.
Exactly. Because if the underpinning of a spiritual abuser is using a person or entity for his or her own needs or wishes or desires. It's about the leader. When it's love, it's not about the leader. It's about the person that you are leading. in your decisions, are they loving decisions? Do they make the team better, the missionary better, the congregation better? Do they improve their esteem, their value, their confidence? And is there less fear? It's like perfect love casts out fear. So if there's a lot of fear involved, you got to say, well, where's the love? And a shepherd will do everything he can or she can to take care of the flock, of the sheep. And I thank you for bringing that out, Beth, because I really think that's, when you love somebody, and I'll go back, if you love the Lord, you're going to do what honors the Lord, not what honors you. And in leadership, I think as spiritual leaders, we have it's a greater weight on us to be Jesus to other people at all times. And so that, thank you for anyone else have a comment or on this definition. And this is not being selfish. This is not being selfish at all.
The thought that crossed my mind, Grant, was how often we're taught that, especially who grew up in certain church traditions, that it really is self-serving to think about loving ourselves and what that means. I think it's a very culturally defined type of approach, maybe culturally defined in the sense of how our church has defined it, whatever church tradition we're part of that may believe in that way. But I often consider it many ways like putting the oxygen mask on ourselves first.
Yes.
And like it says on an airplane pamphlet, then you put it on your child or the next person next to you if they're not doing it. To take care of ourselves is to take care of others. But there seems to be sometimes a blockage that this is not the right way to go in loving ourselves. It's self-serving, it's self-focused. Any thoughts?
Yes. And I agree with you because that's the tradition I grew up in. Jesus, others, and then you. Joy.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's so embedded in Christendom that I think it just takes away the fact, and that's where we'll get to some of these other studies. The more you take care of yourself, the more effective you will be in the kingdom of God. That's documented over and over and over again. And so, I'll jump in ahead. We're all instructed to take care of the temple of the Holy Spirit. All of us. The Spirit of God is in us, His Holy Spirit. And so He resides in our physical body and resides in our mental body and in our brain. And how do we take care of that impacts our ability for Him to manifest Himself. All of us can think of, I can think of a situation, a great missionary died prematurely, could still be alive, effective on the kingdom, but did not take care of his cancer, his medical condition, until it was too late. Because they had that onus, A, God's going to heal me, or B, if I leave, no one's going to be able to do the work and it's going to fall apart. So not loving himself. Because if you love yourself, you take care of yourself. You do what's best for you. And in the process, then helps you be better Christ follower. I don't know if that answered your question, Mark.
Yes. It does answer my question. Excellent. And I just make sure we want to get to Lynn's question. She asked, what do you do when a leader is not loving, like your definition of love?
Boy. Lynn, how about the 4th podcast in January on how to treat spiritual abuse? It would digress us here a little, quite a bit, honestly, but can I say, Lynn, just how about afterwards, email me and maybe we'll go a little deeper into that. I don't want to overlook that but my first response is, okay, do I take care of myself? And if my leader is harming me, not showing me love, then how do I take care of myself? to not let that continue. I have to put a stop to it if at all possible. And so that's a tough one. And I mean, that's Mark, you're going to say something?
Well, I would encourage Lynn
The other
to
Mark. Oh, sorry.
contact you.
Yes,
I would
please.
encourage Lynn to contact you because the thing is that, and the wonderful thing is that our psychologists and counselor have made themselves available to those who view these webinars to contact them. And so I think a more in-depth conversation could take place. So
Yes.
Yeah, please do that, Len. We'd love to have you do so. Great question.
And the other Mark, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to, my train of thought was on a similar path as Lynn's. It was not only like a specific leader, but it could be organizational as well. And to do what's best for your family or yourself, and loving yourself and loving your family. Sometimes
Yes.
you got to remove yourself from a situation, and those are tough decisions and can be tough situations for individuals.
Exceedingly so, Mark, and there's so many moving parts in that decision. So thank you but yeah, we'll follow through with that afterwards. And we definitely, Nathan and Beth and I and Mark did those 4 January ones are really excellent in helping that. And a good book, a great book to help you, Mark and Lynn, is one of my favorite books now, and that's The Bully Pulpit by Michael Kruger. He's got 2 chapters in there, one when to stay and when to leave, and those can be helpful. But thank you. So this definition of love, I hope it's a start. It's a working definition. It can be modified, changed. But let me go a little farther. And this is physiologically, the more you love yourself, the healthier your body is. Period. It's been documented. Less psychopathology, less stress hormone cortisol, which just compromises the immune system. There is increased heart variability. The psychobiological threat system is deactivated. And self-compassion was significantly negative correlated with clergy burnout. So what does that mean? The more self-compassion, the less burnout. The less self-compassion, the more burnout. It's documented. I'll just highlight a couple of these. I'll read the first one. Participants with higher self-compassion have stronger motivations to what? Change for the better, to try harder to learn, to avoid past mistakes, and have higher intrinsic motivation and perceived self-efficacy. 2 great predictors of college outcomes are intrinsic motivation and perceived self-efficacy. The greater you're doing something because you want to do it, and the more you believe you can do it, the more effective you will be in the kingdom. I'll go down that second highlight. People scoring high in trait self-compassion or who are induced to be a self-compassionate frame of mind also tend to experience more happiness, optimism, curiosity, creativity, and such positive emotions as enthusiasm, inspiration, and excited than those who are self-critical. If you really love yourself, you're not going to be self-critical. You're going to be evaluative. You're going to be discerning. But you're not going to just say, okay, I am really a bad person. And here for missionaries, in a study of 3 cultures, self-compassion significantly predicted less depression and greater life satisfaction, suggesting that there may be a universal benefits to self-compassion despite cultural differences. When I do my work, the Teen Challenge, for the last 10 years in Nairobi, Kenya, and Nakuru, this is what we find out, that if we can, this compassion looking at self will help them with their PTSD, overcoming their PTSD symptoms. I'm more likely to forgive others. So how should we love ourselves? And I'm just going to there's a lot of things, but let me just say, I'll highlight a couple of these because I know there's got some other things that we need to do. Setting healthy boundaries. The courage to love self even at the risk of disappointing others. That's what we do. I'm in this boat, gang. I got this work ethic that my parents gave me. Is you just keep working and working and working. You give for whatever you can. People pleasing is not loving self. It's not showing up for yourself. Seeing ourselves as God sees us, created in an image, imago Dei, desired, holy and righteous, his eternal child, were blameless and complete. That's how my Jesus, your Jesus, sees us, and God our Father sees us. He wants to spend eternity with us. He's so excited about it. That's the imago Dei component. I put my image in you because I want to be with you forever. Doing things that make us better people, make us feel good about ourselves, being more productive, being energized, and creating beauty. That's loving ourselves. Being nice, kind, forgiving, encouraging, and merciful to self when we do wrong and sin or do something stupid, or when we have limitations. That's being self-compassionate, loving self. Anyway, taking good care, better care, basic needs, recharging activities, nourish yourself every day, exercise, proper sleep. Those are all key components of loving ourselves. And look at that last one. We honor and protect and care of all the things we love. Wouldn't it be cool if we could love ourselves the same way we love our spouse or our children? And now for me, it's grandchildren. That's what we need. You will be a more effective kingdom worker in loving yourself like the Lord wants us to. And I'm just going, the theology of here, I'm not going to get into the other stuff, but because it's those are self-care. But the theology of self-care questions. Why did God instill the criticalness of the Sabbath and keeping it holy? There's so many times he always, even after they failed, he came back and said, you forsook me and did not keep my Sabbath. Why were all the annual festivals and celebrations important to the Jewish culture? They were party hardy times, 4 or 5 times a year. How do we take care of the temple of the Holy Spirit in a way that honors him? And what does it mean that we are to be good stewards of the gifts and abilities he has given us? So I'll just stop there and turn it over to the next. Oh, we got some more questions though, don't we, Mark? I think, or comments. I don't know. I can't see.
Any further comments or questions for Grant at this time? You can write in the chat box and we can read them, or you can just ask them directly. He'll be happy to answer them. As you're doing that, I just want to say that as you would write Grant, he will send you this slide deck so you can get all the information that he has and make use of it as well. So please feel free to do that. His email address is in the chat box. Any further questions? I really enjoy the dynamic of being able to realize that it's okay for us to love ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what crossed my mind was, as we do take care of ourselves, there is a greater capacity within us to be loving towards others, to fulfill the great commandment in actuality. And even if we're serving as pastors or as missionaries, that dynamic of the great commandment must come before the great commission. I see the great commandment as being the qualifier and the quantifier to be able to successfully proclaim the gospel, whether it's in our context or some global context also. And so anyway, it's just a great way to be able to be completely effective in our proclamation. Lynn is saying, Grant, she doesn't see your email address. So if you could
do it again.
Yeah, please write it in there again. That would be great.
And it's right there too at the bottom of the slide.
Yeah, so maybe take a screenshot of that.
And I'll send it to you too, Lynn. Just kind of wrapping it up here. I was I had a buddy of mine stopped out just outside, just driving by my house and saw me and came in. We were talking, had a good time. He's a MK from Brazil and we played soccer together, and he's both of us retired. So we say goodbye and he can't start his car. Just totally dead. And it's a very, very nice car. His battery's dead. And so we popped the hood and his terminal was all messed up. He never took care of it. And guess what happened? Yes, we do the same thing with our bodies. If we don't medically take care of ourselves, spiritually take care of ourselves, psychologically take care of ourselves, physically, we will not be as effective as we want to be, or as I think the Lord wants us to be. All axes, chainsaws need to be sharpened, and batteries. And you all love it when your phone battery dies, right? And you can't charge it. Just makes you so happy. I'm done. All right. I'll just stop sharing. I'll let the next.
Thank you, Grant. That was excellent. We want to transition to Nathan Davis and Dr. Beth Davis as well. And as I said, they've had great impact upon my wife and I in many, many ways, wife and me in many, many ways. And also when I was area director just over our missionaries in Central Eurasia, they were always a welcome sight when we would have gatherings and come together. And one of the things I've really enjoyed about their work is how they're very ahead of the curve in the sense of putting up guardrails. And what do we do before we get to a place of trauma or collapse, especially when it comes to our mental health? And so Nathan and Beth, we want to turn it to both of you. And so what are the guardrails that we need to put up? What are the things that we need to be aware of today, to start even today, so that we can continue to be healthy in our minds?
Well, thank you, Mark. Early on, I heard a analogy that was given in missions. The story was that a new missionary went to a.
Are we there?
Yeah, we're there.
Okay.
Everyone can hear me, right? Okay. So the story was that a new missionary went to a country and was in a small village and kept seeing villagers who were hurt and needed medical help, because the villagers would traverse the mountain between them and the other village that they would do trade with. In the process of going back and forth, someone would fall and get hurt. So he came up with a great idea. He said, I will write my churches in the States and we will buy you an ambulance so that when someone gets hurt, we can take you to the hospital right away. And he did that. It would cost about $50,000. And then after doing that, he left. Next missionary came in a few years later. The ambulance is sitting there not being used. And he asked why. And they say, well, you know, it just stopped running. It wouldn't run anymore. And we don't have money for parts. And we don't even know how to fix it. So it just sits there. And so he said, well, I'll do one better. He said, I'll build a clinic at the base of the mountain here. And when someone gets hurt, someone can just come to the clinic right here instead of having to go to an ambulance to a city far away. And so he had teams come in from the States and they built a clinic there, and other teams come to train people. And then he left. Third missionary comes along and sees that pigs are being raised in the clinic and asks what's going on. And they say, well, you know, every time we have people that got trained, they would get hired away to the city. And so we don't have anyone here to do anything in the clinic, because every time they get trained, someone in the city hires them away. And so no one here knows what to do. And so an elderly man said, well, I think I know what to do. He was a member of the village. He said, I think that we can build guardrails along the roads that we have going over the mountains that keep us from falling and hurting ourselves to start with. And so they cut the trees and put the guardrails in themselves for free. And it solved their problem. The resilient skills that are available to prevent burnout and depression are already here, folks. Those are our guardrails. And unfortunately, sometimes we ignore them and don't even ask what they are. So basically, Beth is going to go down through some of these, and I will go down through some others. The whole idea is that when you experience burnout, a chemical reaction happens in the brain that uses up serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, and quite a few other chemicals in the brain. And that results in burnout. It's a chemical deficiency in the brain. And there are lifestyle behaviors that naturally build those chemicals in the brain. These chemicals are produced only in the brain, so you can't get a shot to do it. You can't take a pill. You have to do some lifestyle behaviors. And as we do these behaviors, guardrails go up, the chemicals are built in the brain, and we end up having a margin that protects us against burnout. And the first one that Beth's going to talk about is sleep.
And sleep is the most, I think all 6 of these are so important, but sleep is free and sleep is available. And yet it's one of the things that busy, called people with meaningful lives often forget or put off and act as if it's something that we can cheat ourselves on. So the encouragement is to, in any way that you can, to find enough sleep for you. It differs from every person. Some people need 7, some people need 9, some people have a little less or more, but basically 8 to 9 hours of sleep is required for all of us to have a good, effective day.
And I'm going to interject here that sleep is the primary time that your body builds serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain. It happens while you sleep. So if you don't sleep very much, guess what? Eventually, you're going to have problems.
So it's robbing you of those chemicals. And we kind of, again, you kind of feel like going to sleep is a luxury. Actually, it's a necessity. So I encourage every minister, every missionary, every person who has any kind of meaning in life to make sure they're regenerating every single night as much as they can. And then to reserve the bed for obviously sleeping, not using it for television reading, and taking your computer to bed with you does not help you sleep well. The white noise may help you. That's another suggestion. We also always say to eliminate any kind of gadgets, including televisions, computers, cell phones. I would say, yeah, at least 30 minutes before you go to sleep. They've found that it interferes with good sound sleep. So let's try to do that. Also, a good thing to do is to eliminate food for 2 hours before you sleep. It's not always possible, but as much as you can to do any of these things on this list will help you to have that better, good quality of sleep and to wake up feeling rested the next day. Most everybody knows caffeine is not good. And actually it stays in your system a lot longer than people realize. You can't always have even a cup of coffee at dinner if it's going to affect your sleep later.
Yeah, the half-life of caffeine is 7 hours. So yeah, at 7 hours after you have a cup of coffee, half of it's still there in your body.
So, and everyone is different. There are certainly people who can fall asleep after caffeine. I'm not arguing that point, but if it affects you, then take notice of that and protect your sleep at all costs. One of the things that I like to remind people about is this area of conflict. So many of our couples that we talk to over the years in ministry, both spouses are so busy during the day and handling so many different things that the only time they get together is toward the evening. And as they're kind of getting wound down and ready for bed, they start talking about things that may lead to conflict. It may not be that they are conflict, but my advice here is if you see something that you're wanting to bring up, if it even has the potential for conflict, avoid it and put it off until the next day. Because for so many of us, that kind of conflict late at night is just going to keep us awake and rob us of good sleep. Some people are helped by milk. It has melatonin. Also, melatonin tablets are available to give you a better night of sleep as well. So I'm going to move on to exercise, which is my favorite thing to talk about. I so believe that exercise if you do it ritually, and if it becomes a habit, it becomes something that you can't live without. It's like that vitamin pill that you just pop every morning. There's something about getting in the ritual of exercising that releases, again, serotonin, norepinephrine, all of those wonderful chemicals that Nathan talked about, that as you work yourself in 20 to 40 minutes, they say, per day, that you don't have to do that every day. Suggestion is 3 to 4 times, sometimes 5 times a week, depending on how much you can work it into your schedule. But as your heartbeat raises during that first 20 minutes and after the 20 minutes, you actually start producing the chemicals that you need that will help your brain to function better. And all of these are connected, because as you exercise, you're going to have a better, have better reactions with the people around you. You're also going to sleep better. So it's like, if you take one, that's a great start, but the more of these lifestyles that you adapt and work into your life as a just daily routine, it will help you to live better throughout each day. And also as leaders, I think as leaders take on these lifestyles for themselves, they can then encourage people around them to do the same thing, and it makes ministry a better place. Schedule it, put it on your schedule. I think I've talked to Mark Hausfeld, has talked about this, how he writes it into his daily planner, what time you're going to exercise. Don't let it just happen. But just as you write down who you're going to have lunch with on a certain day, put exercise in a certain spot. And if someone wants to do something with you that during that time, I often say, I already have something going on at that time, and just protect it. Very important to make time for exercise.
Now, you may ask, say, this all seems kind of common sense. It's common sense, but there's a physiological connection behind it. About 15 years ago, Dr. A. Lardy from the University of Kansas talked about the 6 lifestyles we're talking about. And he had about 250 severely depressed patients. And he assigned in a test, he assigned a coach for every single patient to do each of these 6 lifestyles every single day. The coach would help the patient do it. Within 6 weeks, none of the 250 patients were depressed. And prior to this, all 250 had severe depression. So the research behind this shows that these 6 lifestyles rewire and cause your brain to produce the chemicals that it needs for resilience. And unfortunately, these are the very things that missionaries and ministers often ignore. Our forefathers worked on a farm. We work in an office. We don't do exercise. Our forefathers worked on a farm where they had sunlight every day. If you work in a normal office, you may have as much as 80 or 100-foot Lamberts, versus outside there is 10,000. When you get over 1,000-foot Lamberts of light, it triggers your brain to start producing, guess what? The same thing it produces when you sleep, the same thing it produces when you exercise. It starts producing serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, and many other chemicals that it needs to prevent depression and burnout. But we now spend our time in the office, not out in the farm farming, or like Adam and Eve, all day outside gathering and tending a garden. So our modern lifestyle is doing us as humans, and especially ministers and missionaries, is doing us in, because our time is spent indoors. And so I say, get outside, get the sun exposure you need. It takes 30 minutes of that bright sunlight to trigger your brain to start producing these chemicals. So if you stop at 25 minutes, guess how much you get? None. Your brain doesn't start till you're outside for 30 minutes. Now you may say, what do I do if I live in a northern climate or a place that has a huge amount of pollution? Buy a light box. I buy, you see this picture here shows a light box. I let it sit there beside my computer and I turn it on and I forget about it for the rest of the morning. But by noon, man, I'm flying high. Naturally high. Because my brain is being stimulated to produce the chemicals that normally Adam and Eve would have had normally, as well as my ancestors, but my lifestyle is indoors without the sunlight. And so these now are available for $23. They're so cheap. Make sure you get one that's LED. Make sure you get one. I have one that works on both 220 and 110 automatically. There's many different varieties, but you see it's about the size of a 6x9 notepad there. And I can just pack it in my briefcase when I go traveling and plug it in. My only problem has been that missionaries keep buying them off me faster than I can buy them for myself. But they're available on Amazon. And so I encourage you that if you're like me and you live at a place where you don't get enough light, artificial light is good as long as it's bright enough. At least 10,000 foot, or excuse me, at least 1,000 foot lamberts. There's two types of omega. Actually, there's several types of omega. One's omega-3, which comes mainly from leafy vegetables and from fish. The other's omega-6, which comes from beef and animal products. And that omega, not all animal products are bad. The problem with American animal products is they are fed corn and grain products, which are high in omega-6. And so our beef in America, in northern America, is very high in omega-6, which counteracts the omega-3. The omega-3 is what your brain uses. Is a base chemical your brain uses to produce, guess what? Serotonin and norepinephrine are made from the omega-3 molecule. If you don't get enough omega-3, you are messed up, no matter what. And you're going to be messed up. Simple as that. Our forefathers ate lots of vegetables, especially leafy vegetables. They got a lot of omega-3. And their beef and cattle were pasture fed, not grain fed. And so even the beef, like in Argentina, it's grass-fed beef and is good for you. But in North America, our chicken, our beef, our turkey, even our farm-fed fish is fed grain and is extremely high in omega-6, which counteracts and binds up the omega-3. So if you want to be healthy, don't live in North America. Instead, make sure you get omega-3. You may say, what do I do if I live in North America like I do? Hey, I take an omega-3 tablet every day. 1,000 milligrams is enough to give your brain the extra margin it needs to start producing those very important chemicals. And remember, those chemicals are produced only inside the brain. They're not chemicals that are produced elsewhere. So if you don't get enough omega-3, your brain's not going to produce what it needs. Our beef in North America is fed grain. It's a heart attack grill. And yes, we may want a double hamburger. And eventually we'll have a double bypass. And I love the old-fashioned French fries that were fried in pure lard. Yes, it tastes good. But that is high in omega-6.
One of the most surprising things that I find among everyone in ministry, regardless of where they minister, is this sense of they get so much social interaction in their work that it's often tempting to pull back and withdraw from opportunities to be in social relationships. I find myself in that place. I tend to be an introvert. And so if I have free time and there's a party, sometimes I'll just say, I don't need to go to that party. I don't need to go to that gathering. But this is dangerous because if we do too much of this without balancing our solitude with our social time, again, what happens in social relationships as we share with one another is, again, our brain is producing these amazing chemicals, which is a guardrail, which prevents us from depression. What a lot of people don't realize is that letting your wife go out for coffee, or sending your husband golfing with his friends, and being aware that these are very important investments in our longevity and in our brain health. So I try to remind myself, I try to remind Nathan too, that sometimes when we're weary, we've had just too much. There are times, of course, like Grant said, that we have to do the self-care that says, no, I'm going to rest. I'm going to take a Sabbath. I'm going to actually say some no's. But many times we can say yes. And I encourage us to do the say yes to invitations, because it's in those times that we're with people. Our brain is producing this wonderful sense of belonging that heals our depression. And I think many of us, you that are listening, can identify with these times when you maybe didn't feel like going out. You'd been working all day and you're like, oh, I have one more thing to do and I'm not going to do it. But you do it anyway. And then you come home and you have that high. It's almost like a runner's high of, I've had some interaction with some people that have given me a sense of belonging, a sense of they've encouraged me. This is something that's just part of, again, guardrails to make sure that we do enough, that we balance. I put that balance in there too, to say, make sure that you are resting when you need to rest, but not resting because you're sick of people and don't want to be with them for a long time. So make that balance. And also, when you're with people, it isn't the chattering on a surface level that makes your brain produce serotonin. Many people have thousands of Facebook friends, and you have people who you may know their name and you may know a little bit about where they work, but going deeper and getting to know people on a deeper level is where your brain really starts engaging in that wonderful sense of healing and that sense of connection. So keep these things in mind as you live your life in ministry, because you're with people all the time. It may feel like, oh, I have plenty of friends, I have plenty of people, but who are the core people? Who are the people that you share with deeply? Sometimes this is easier for women, I understand, than men, although it's not entirely gender-based. But women have historically gotten together very easily and shared on a deep level. Whereas sometimes the counterparts, I'm not generalizing totally, but it is primarily it's more difficult for men to bond. So work on this, regardless of where you are, your personality or gender, find ways to get together with people and bond deeply, sharing.
As you do.
If I could
Okay.
just interject real quick, the research is real clear about social support and strengthening the immune system. Those with higher social support are less prone to colds, flus, and that kind of stuff, versus those that don't have that, and they're more likely to get colds and flu, because the immune system is directly correlated to the amount of social support system.
And again, when you think about people in ministry, you're so exposed to lots of germs all the time. So far more important, I think, for us to be aware of having that good support system to keep our immune system. That's really good. Thank you. Thank you.
And of these 6 lifestyles, research shows that social engagement is the most important. It's actually as important as all the other lifestyles put together. And so it's so easy for us as ministers and missionaries to say, I've had enough, and not have really deep social engagement where we can talk at a deep level. Okay, we have one more lifestyle to talk about. Rumination. Rumination is what a cow does when it chooses cud. It's cud. We do the same thing when we chew things over again and again and again in our mind. It's called rumination, mental rumination. And what does Jesus say about rumination? He never uses that word, but he says, do not worry. Worry is rumination. It's the old biblical word instead of the modern word of rumination. It's the same thing. Jesus says, don't do it. Csikszentmihalyi is a Polish psychologist who came up with this idea of flow. The idea is flow is any activity that you can get so engaged in it that you don't think about time, you don't think about anything else. You are flowing with that activity. You're in total flow. You cannot have flow and ruminate or worry at the same time. Think about it this way. Have you ever played baseball? Most of us have. When the pitcher throws that ball at you and you're focusing on that ball to hit it, can you worry at the same time that you're trying to hit that ball? Can you worry about things at work? You can, but you won't hit the ball. You have to focus totally on that activity, and that's called flow. You're flowing mentally with that one activity only, and you cannot worry. You cease to worry for that amount of time. For some of us, it happens during golf. Some happens during tennis. For me, it happens during fishing. It also happens while playing the piano. I can't worry while playing the piano, or I'm going to hit the wrong note every time. So each of us has activities that is our favorite activity, that if we will do that activity as ministers and as missionaries and engage in that activity, we cannot worry at the same time. It blocks the worry. Our hobbies are God-given for a reason. You have natural interests for a reason, and so do I. And so I believe it's very, very holy for me to go fishing. And for some people, it's holy to go golfing or whatever, because you have a natural, God-given interest in that, and that blocks worry. You cannot worry while doing it at the same time. So flow is an activity that you get so mentally engaged in that it blocks worry. It's anti-rumination. It's the opposite. It's not just blocking rumination, it's letting you heal mentally. And Csikszentmihalyi from Poland has a great amount of research and volumes of books on anti-rumination that I'd love to point you toward. So anyway, as missionaries and as pastors, occupational moves are the norm. Geographical moves are the norm. Heavy work schedules can be the norm. During these times, you may go through a season of intense work. Realize that maintaining structure during that time can serve as a form of flow, the effort to maintain that structure. And as soon as you can get through that temporary, make it sure it's temporary, a temporary time, so you can get back to doing your flow activity, whatever it is. And I want to encourage you to think about flow as a biblical and holy activity that God has ordained just for you only. Because it blocks worry, the very thing Jesus says, don't do it. The Bible talks about flow, not using that word, but using other words. And so we've gone through 6 lifestyles. We have 11 more lifestyles in a book that we put out. And if you're interested, you can go ahead and make a screen copy of this and get a copy of this book. What questions do you have? We've gone in lightning speed through this.
Yes, please feel free to ask verbally. That's just as fine as putting into the chat. So does anybody have any questions they'd like to pose to Nathan and Beth? While you're thinking, one of the things I'm going to go back to, Nathan and Beth, is how interesting it is, like dopamine and the other 2 chemicals that bring resilience to us. I find that it's interesting. Sleep does that. So ideally, that's 1/3 of the day. And then the other dynamic is being out in sunlight and then what we eat. So that pretty much takes up 24 hours of the day, if you think about it. What about you said a minimum of 30 minutes. If it's interrupted, let's say that you're working at your desk and the timer goes off for you to go out and you want to take a 10-minute walk outside if you don't have a light box. If you would do that 3-4 hours out of the day, get up, take in another 10 minutes, 10 minutes times 4, would that amount of time go towards developing more serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine in you, or do you have to do it 30 minutes at least?
I wish we could do it with breakup times, but it takes 30 minutes before your brain trips a trigger and starts producing that serotonin and norepinephrine and dopamine. It won't happen until you've been out in it for 30 minutes. So 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there doesn't do it. The same thing with exercise. 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there doesn't do it. You have to have 20 minutes of aerobic activity before your body starts producing these chemicals.
It's like the best thing that it seems to me you can do in a lifestyle is to combine those two things, the running outside, the biking outside, the walking outside, the combining it, it'd be a power walk, obviously, but
exercising outside with a friend while you talk, boy, you get 3 for 1.
Right. That's excellent information. It's something that should be scheduled. We have a question that's come up from Generation Church. We're at a miraculously growing church. It seems like every season is a hard-working and busy season. There aren't ebbs and flows like normal ministry or life. What can I do to set up a high-capacity lifestyle without burnout? Great question.
Well, Dr. Ilardi from University of Kansas shows that these particular lifestyles stimulate your brain, produce a margin of these chemicals, not just these 3 chemicals, but other chemicals also. Burnout and depression is a depletion of the chemicals that are now normally produced in the brain, and our modern lifestyle is usually what does us in. And so I guess I want to encourage every minister, whether overseas or in the States or wherever, to pay particular focus on these particular lifestyles, because these particular ones, these 6, actually cause your brain to produce some very important chemicals that it won't get otherwise. And our modern lifestyle undermines these particular things very, very rapidly. It's a culture of the modern world that we're fighting against, and we usually don't see it. And so I try to encourage ministers, focus on these 6, if nothing else. We have 11 more in the book also that are I think very important also.
Yeah.
But these 6 are critical for the chemical balance in your brain. And so, yeah, schedule schedule sleep, schedule each of these. And the reality is that if you're only doing 5 of these, and that one you're not doing a socialization, you will not recover from burnout. Or your recovery will last usually about 2 years versus a few months. The recovery is very, very slow. You leave out one of these, and it's a huge hampering. Do all 6, because I need as much mental sharpness as I can get.
So if I could jump in there, Generation Church, congratulations on the growth and the beauty that's being created there. On my previous slide, there are 4 things at the end of it, steps for self-care in the midst of work, in the midst of ministry. It's designed to do both. And so I encourage you, just to review those, send me your email and I'll get them to you, because they are important. And it starts, number 1 is, what is my purpose and meaning in life? What is my big picture? Why am I here? And so from that stems, okay, what's the call? Then the things that I bring into my life have to be around that. And so there's some of those things there that you can do that I highly recommend. And I designed it for missionaries to read that and ministers to read that, because I know the demand that is put on a pastor and a missionary is a greater stress load than pretty much any other occupation. So we have to acknowledge that reality, that it's a 24/7 job, theoretically, trying to be a shepherd, and especially if the flock keeps growing, and you need some extra help with that. Just those four may help you out. They will. I think they could help you out. Yes.
Well, I want to thank Doctors Beth Davis and Grant Jones and Nathan Davis for their time today and what they've shared. I want to go back with all that's been said, that have been such practical, scientifically proven steps. This is how God has made us. And to think that we're also living, moving, and having our being in a world that we were never created to live in. We weren't meant to live in a fallen world. So all the more reason for us to be intentional about taking care of ourselves so that our mental health is at an optimum level in this fallen state that we're in. And to think that we can reach that because God has provided these kinds of things and this wisdom and knowledge that our panel has shared with us today. So we encourage you, work these into your lives, schedule them, put them on your calendar, create margins where you need to create margins, where you can say no, say no. And don't be afraid of it being unspiritual or being detrimental. Remember, what is best for you is best for everyone else, especially those closest to you. And so with that, we are going to conclude our webinar today. Again, write Dr. Jones, Dr. Davis's about the slide deck that they'd be happy to send you. Please check out the Davis's books. They have a multitude of texts that they've written that are excellent. And this one in particular, find out what those other 5 lifestyle areas are that you can bring into your life so that you can be all that God would have you to be, and not live at the level of mediocrity that perhaps we are. And sometimes we slide into that, but to know that we can work these things into our lives, whether we're sleeping, eating, or out and about, whether it's a light box on our desk or taking at least a 30-minute walk or jog. And so with that, thank you for being on today. And it's been great to have you with us. And if there's anything that we can do for you, please contact us. Our email addresses are on the chat box, and just write us. We'd be happy to address anything you have to ask. And I encourage you to go to our Institute for Ministerial Wholeness website, imwholeness.org, www.imwholeness.org, and explore that. And all of our previous webinars, if you're interested in spiritual direction, there's an opportunity to connect with me and talk about that. Would love to do that with you. We're seeing wonderful fruit come out of people's walk with Jesus as they engage in spiritual direction as well. And so with that, God bless you all. And we're going to sign off. And thank you so much for being with us. And also take note that on Wednesday, July 17th, we're going to do part 3 of our mental health series, Mental Health and the Ministry Supporting Others with Mental Health Challenges. And so how we can be a blessing to other people and come alongside them as well. And I'm sure we'll all learn something from that for ourselves too. And so with that, thank you, everyone. It's great to be with you today. Goodbye.